My golden brother demanded I pay his debt. It was my responsibility, not his fault. I was spending the night at my best friend's house when I got a call that changed everything. My parents told me my younger brother Jake was in the hospital with life-threatening injuries. After some back and forth, I finally got the full story. Jake had stolen my fully restored 1970 Chevy Impala, driven it drunk, and crashed it. I was furious at Jake for doing something so reckless and at my parents for enabling him his entire life. I told my friend what had happened and rushed to the hospital. What I saw there was worse than I imagined. When I got to the hospital, I went straight to the front desk. The nurse directed me to the waiting room where I found my family. I ran to my mom and hugged her, asking what happened. She said Jake had been speeding and hit a tree. I asked how he was doing, and she took a deep breath, covering her mouth. It looked like she'd been crying before I arrived. She said Jake had suffered spinal injuries. If he survived the emergency surgery, they didn't know if he'd ever walk or even move again. He might be paralyzed from the shoulders down. The news hit me like a truck. I sat there trying to process a storm of emotions: anger, heartbreak, fear, frustration. I told myself not to think about the car. He was my brother. His life mattered more, but I had poured my entire savings into restoring that Impala. My dream car. Gone. When I mentioned the car, my mom cut me off. She told me it didn't matter, that I should be praying for my brother to survive. I understood that. Of course, I wanted Jake to live. But what no one acknowledged was how he had destroyed something that meant everything to me, and how he'd done it through pure irresponsibility. This wasn't new. My parents always focused on Jake's side of things, never mine. When I was 7, I had a teddy bear I adored named Bear Bear. He was one of the few meaningful gifts I'd ever gotten. One day, the family dog Coco, the dog Jake begged for, ripped Bear Bear apart. His stuffing was everywhere: the living room, the bedrooms, even the kitchen. I never found all his limbs. My parents blamed me for leaving my bear where the dog could get it. Then they told me to clean up Coco's mess. That was how things always went. Jake got what he wanted. I got blamed. We stayed at the hospital all night. When morning came, a doctor entered the waiting room holding a clipboard. My heart dropped. I braced for the worst. He told us Jake was stable but would need more surgeries. We followed him to the room. Seeing Jake lying there, unmoving, wires everywhere, was surreal. My parents stayed. I couldn't. I said goodbye and asked them to keep me updated. Over the next few days, while Jake was in recovery, I was falling apart. The insurance company called. Because Jake wasn't on my policy, they refused to cover the damage. The bill, hundreds of thousands. I was on the hook for all of it. I work as an electrical engineer for an architecture and engineering firm. It's a good job, but not good enough to pay off a debt that size. My mind was a mess. At work, I couldn't focus. I'd sit at my desk, frozen in front of my screen, unable to even move my mouse. My supervisor started noticing. He'd check in often, asking if I was okay. I wasn't. I began missing deadlines. The work I did submit was sloppy or full of errors. I was usually the guy who believed turning something in on time meant it was late. But now, I couldn't even function. One day during lunch, I overheard my coworker Catherine talking to our boss. She complained about having to double-check everything I submitted, that it took longer to fix my mistakes than to just do it herself. That hit me hard. But I couldn't even be mad. She was right. I tried to pull it together, but the pressure from the insurance company got worse. They kept calling, asking for payments I couldn't make. They offered plans, but I couldn't afford any of them. Eventually, I realized I might have to sell my house just to survive. This accident had derailed all my plans. I had been saving to move closer to work. That dream was gone now, all because of Jake. One day, he called me from rehab. He asked for money to help with his medical bills. I explained my situation. Told him I was broke because of what he did. He told me to screw off and hung up. Then his friends started calling, harassing me for not supporting him. When I tried to explain the debt and what I was going through, they didn't care. Instead, they started dragging me online. They mocked my appearance, said I was nothing without that car. And honestly, that's how I felt. That Impala meant everything to me. It wasn't just a car. When I was a kid, I was close with my granddad. We did everything together, mowed the lawn, hung out on the porch. One day we flipped through a magazine and saw a photo of the Impala. He said, "Man, I'd love to drive one of those." He passed away from cancer not long after. He never got that chance. But I did. I bought the car in his memory. I restored it piece by piece. I wish he could have seen it. I know he'd be proud. When I talked to our mutual friends, they all sided with Jake. They said I should cut him some slack because he's younger, that I should help him out like a big brother is supposed to. I couldn't believe it. I wanted this nightmare to be over. I finally called my parents and asked to meet. I knew they'd be at the hospital with Jake, so I went there. Just before I walked into the room, I overheard them talking. They said they couldn't increase Jake's allowance because they were helping pay his medical bills. Allowance. I walked in. They looked shocked to see me. I asked them what they meant. They tried to change the subject, asked how work was going, how I was feeling. I asked again, "How much money have you been giving Jake?" They looked guilty, then admitted they had been giving him $500 a week. Since he was 13, everything made sense. Jake had no sense of responsibility because he never had to be responsible. My parents had always bailed him out. Always. Meanwhile, when I asked for help growing up, they were stingy. Always said no. Hearing this felt like a slap to the face, and I was the one drowning in debt now while they bailed him out again. They tried to explain why they helped him so much. I didn't care. I walked out. After that hospital visit, I reached a breaking point. Over the next few months, I made the hard decision to sell my house. I didn't get as much as I hoped since I needed the money quickly, but at least it cleared the debt from the wrecked Impala. It stung to let the house go, but the financial weight finally lifted. I moved into a decent apartment only 20 minutes from my job. That part was a small win. I visited Jake now and then as he recovered, but my relationship with our parents continued to unravel. Every visit turned into an argument. They accused me of being ungrateful. Told me I should be thankful Jake survived the crash, as if that erased everything else. Jake often joined in blaming me for how things turned out. He said if I'd just helped him more, maybe none of this would have happened. My parents never stepped in to correct him. They always had an excuse. He was stressed in pain on medication. But that didn't justify the way he spoke to me. He didn't know the first thing about real stress. I was fed up with all of them. A few months later, Jake was discharged from the hospital and moved in with our parents. Thanksgiving rolled around, and despite everything, they asked me to join them. I shouldn't have gone. After months of tension and disrespect, I knew better. But I still hoped naively that maybe we could at least share one meal without conflict. At dinner, my mom complimented how healthy Jake looked. She said he was walking better every day. Jake joked that he'd be walking just fine if he hadn't been stuck in bed for almost a year. I couldn't bite my tongue. I said, "You wouldn't have been in the hospital at all if you hadn't stolen my car." Jake slammed his hand on the table and snapped, "I'm not a thief. I'm not talking to you." My mom jumped in to play mediator, just like she had our whole lives. And just like always, she took his side. "Don't be so harsh," she said. "It's Thanksgiving." That was it. I looked at her and said, "You're the reason he's like this. You and Dad. You've always enabled him. You always take his side. That's why he's reckless, careless, and entitled. You created this." They tried to argue back, but I was done. I tossed my fork onto my plate and walked out. I haven't spoken to any of them since that night. The last time I contacted them was through a letter. I wrote that I loved them, but being part of the family had become too damaging. I told them I was moving to a new city and asked them not to follow or try to reach out. 3 months later, I started over. New city, new apartment, new job. The new job paid better and had a healthier work environment. I joined a local classic car club that traveled around the country together. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Eventually, I found another Impala for sale. It wasn't perfect, needed a lot of work, but it was the same model. I bought it. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I also started therapy. The childhood trauma, the years of being sidelined, blamed, and overlooked, it needed to be unpacked. The more I processed it, the clearer everything became. It wasn't just about the car. It was about years of being the forgotten child, the responsible one, the one who was always expected to carry the weight while Jake got coddled. Life finally started to feel good again. I had purpose, freedom, peace. Then I got a phone call from the authorities. Jake was in trouble again. Turns out he had somehow gotten access to one of my old credit cards. He had been using it while getting involved with a shady group that flipped stolen cars for cash. They'd buy vehicles dirt cheap, modify them so they were unrecognizable, and resell them for profit. He'd used my card to fund some of the purchases. I immediately called the credit card company, explained the situation, and closed the account. It was the last tie he had to me. And just like that, the final thread was cut. I didn't feel angry, just done, relieved. I had built a new life. I had worked hard to move on. And I was proud of the person I had become. But it was bittersweet too, knowing that Jake would probably keep causing chaos. My parents would keep cleaning it up, enabling him. Just like always, but not with my help anymore. I finally had peace, and this time I wasn't letting it go. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.